Now entering the squared circle pit, we have a man that needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is an 11-time WWE champion and a Hall of Famer and a rock guy. We're here with Adam Edge Copeland. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, dude.
Yeah, man, this is going to be fun. I talk wrestling all the time, but I don't get to talk music all the time. And if I do, I usually end up boring my wife because I go into the minutia of things, and she's like, "Okay, I get it. I love music too, but enough." So this is great.
Awesome. Well, I'm all about the minutia of music, so feel free to rant as much as you want.
Okay.
My first question is, what did you get into first? Was it rock music or pro wrestling? Which hit you first?
It was actually rock music. And I got really lucky in that my mom and my uncles, who were all relatively close in age to me, all listened to really cool music. And that filtered to me. So, my earliest memories, my mom introduced me to the Beatles. She really introduced me to Zeppelin. And Zeppelin hit me early on. She also listened to the Doors, to America. And then my uncles were listening to Cheap Trick and Queen and Boston and just a lot of really great 70s rock bands. So they got me hooked on all that stuff. But my first discovery of my own, and really, I guess, my gateway, and I've realized that it seems to be a lot of people's gateway into metal, was KISS. And the minute I saw them, I couldn't really comprehend what I was seeing, but it hooked me to the point where, there's pictures of me running around in a little powder blue KISS Destroyer t-shirt at 3 years old. I had a little plastic red and white Fender. Like I wanted to be Ace Frehley or Paul Stanley. And that was my first indoctrination, I think, into, heavier music. And they were mine. That was my discovery. My uncles and everything, they thought they were okay, but KISS was purely mine. And thankfully, my mom was cool enough to go, "All right, I get it," and this guy likes them. The only thing that was ever kind of mentioned with a warning was Black Sabbath. Sabbath was the band that was like, "Oh, okay, I don't know. They kind of scare me." This was my mom, and then when I heard them, I understood it. I was like, "Oh my God, this just sounds like evil incarnate," and I want to find out more about it.
What was the album or the song? Do you remember the first Sabbath stuff that you?
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and just I just remember being scared, but at the same time intrigued. Like I knew I was going to come back to it. I knew it was too much for me at that point, but I knew I was going to circle back to this thing because one day I'd fully grasp and not be scared off by it.
That's cool. Yeah, like all of these bands, that's funny. Like I got into kind of later in my, not like the classic, because I didn't have an older sibling or an uncle or anyone to kind of show me the way. I had to find my own way. So it's cool.
Yeah.
Those were your intros. Because for me, I had to go back and be like, well, let me get into the stuff that all the bands I like.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I got in so early and so young that I almost had to do that with the Maidens and the Metallicas of the world, because I was still listening to their influences and not really up to speed on them until like a couple of years after. And I went, well, hold on a second. They just took this thing and raised the stakes.
Yeah, that's cool that you went in a chronological order. So what are some of the bands that you listen to now? What are your current jams, stuff that you visit?
Oh man. I mean, I'm kind of all over the place, but metal is always going to be in there. And for me, especially when I'm working out, I just have to, it has to be like, there's no folk music. I love, Pearl Jam and Tom Petty and things like that, but they're not going to be on my workout list. So, there's probably going to be some early Crew. There's going to be some Ozzy. There's definitely going to be Pantera, Seven Dust, Soundgarden. I love Thin Lizzy, and I don't know if you can consider them metal per se, but I think they influenced Maiden and Priest and so many bands with the dual guitar attack that, I love Thin Lizzy. Alter Bridge, Mark Tremonti. Man, Tremonti's solo stuff is always going to be on my playlist. White Zombie, especially early White Zombie. There's always going to be some Black Label Society, because Zakk Wylde is just a complete madman, and I love him. So it's, Amanda Mars are always going to be on there. They're, I guess, them and Machine Head, I guess, might be my most current metal bands that I've kind of picked up along the way. I don't know how current you can call them, but they're still putting out music currently. Anthrax, man, early Cult, Faith No More. Again, there's debate. Are they metal? Are they? But they definitely have elements.
Yeah.
Right. Slipknot. I mean, the stuff that they do, it's so progressive yet so melodic, which can be such a fine balance to find. Behemoth. Behemoth is probably my new version of Sabbath. I guess in that you listen to it, you could be scared.
They're definitely bringing up the evil quotient for modern acts, for sure.
Yeah.
And they have the imagery and everything. Like, their live show is very much an experience. Like, it's very immersive. It's not just like, four guys on stage playing their instruments. It's almost as if they're playing the characters of their, created personas.
Yeah, it's a visual thing as well. And same with Slipknot. It's very much a visual thing. It hits on a lot of different fronts, and I appreciate that, especially, like I said, KISS being my, for lack of a better term, my gateway drug into heavy music, and I appreciate that. Like, I love the musicianship, but I love the fact that you're seeing a little bit more than that when you see bands like that. And I actually just caught Behemoth and Slipknot on their last tour, before the pandemic and everything hit. And it was my first time seeing both bands, and I was just like, this is the apocalypse. It was great.
Yeah, and like with Slipknot especially, I think they really got the visual, like they always had the visual aspect of the performance down, and it's like almost like you're going to the circus. It's a whole visual presentation in addition to the music, which adds to the music, in my opinion.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And especially, I mean, you have a dude pounding on barrels with a baseball bat, and it just looks like some kind of dystopian. It looks like the books I enjoy reading. If that makes any sense.
Do you ever go to these shows and kind of take something from the live aspect that you apply to pro wrestling?
I've always patterned my current incarnation of Edge off of some rock act, so there's stars in there. Well, that's a throwback to Paul. And I always said the rated R superstar version of Edge was, in my mind, Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. That kind of dirty band of gypsies that you do not want your daughter going anywhere near. No redeeming social qualities whatsoever. That was kind of my template for that version of Edge, was thinking back to everything I'd read about GNR before they broke, and just how gnarly everything was, and early Motley Crue before Too Fast for Love hit, or just as it was hitting, kind of thing, and that kind of vibe. But everything down to my trench coats and my gear, even my current design on my gear, it's a skull throwing up the horns. It's all very rock and metal influenced, because that's what I dig. And there's always going to be a little bit of Adam injected into what Edge is as a presentation, and I pull that from my musical influences.
That's really cool. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that GNR thing, so I'm glad that you touched on that. So, and for me, I think there's a huge connection between rock music and pro wrestling. They just go hand in hand, and I feel like, as you've just described, you're kind of the epitome of that connection, where there's so many things in common that both industries can learn from. Like Axl Rose was a great heel,
Yeah, and he pushed buttons, and Marilyn Manson did too. I mean, Alice Cooper, Arthur Clarke. Like, there's so many musicians that visually presented and pushed buttons, and that goes hand in hand with wrestling. That's part of her job, is to push those emotional buttons. But I really draw a lot, to the point where, theme music to me is one of the most important aspects of Edge. And it always has been, because one of my vices, my only vice on the road, was reading and listening to music. So all of my plane trips, I had music. And if I just needed a break from music, then I was reading. So it was always influencing what I was doing. So when it came time to pick music, I didn't initially like my first theme music. And when I realized I needed to be more hands-on with things, that's when, I got Rob Zombie. And then eventually that's when I got Alter Bridge. And to me, it sets the entire tone. As soon as that first chord or that first drum hits, that to me, it colors everything from that point forward. It absolutely sets the pace. It sets the tone, because I knew, sitting there in that audience, anytime I would hear that riff of Real American or something, like, gong, 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 I was up out of my seat. And I wanted to make sure that fans now have that experience when Edge comes out. So, it needed to be heavy. It needed to be something that was melodic too, that you could sing along to. And when Mark Tremonti and I, kind of stumbled on each other at a Metallica show, and I heard just his initial, with him singing Metalingus, I went, dude, when I come back, because I was out with a neck injury at the point, I was like, when I come back, can I use that? And he went, yeah, absolutely. And then in that time, he got Miles. And then I heard it with Miles, and I was like, oh my God, yes, this is happening. And so from that day forward, it was my music. It will always be my music. There's a reason it always wins these, greatest wrestling entrance themes of all time. It's because it works on so many levels, to the point where I'd come back through the curtain and most of the locker room would be singing On This Day. And I'm like, okay, it's hitting. It's sticking. This is what
It's such an earworm.
Yeah, it just gets in there and you can't get it out. And it also marks your face off too. So there's that.
Before Alter Bridge, Mark Tremonti was in Creed, and I feel like there was kind of like everyone was over Creed at that moment. That it was like the very in thing to hate on Creed. And I think when you you kind of helped to make Alter Bridge cool. I feel like you kind of helped them shed the whatever Creed hate there was. I feel just because here you were a very cool character, and you were kind of endorsing them, I feel.
Well, and they sounded so different.
Right.
I think they went with what worked, and those big power chords and those anthemic themes worked. I think there's a lot of Scott Stapp backlash. I think it's more Scott Stapp than it is Steve per se. You know what I mean? So I think those guys went and really recreated themselves and recreated their style, because if you listen to both bands, you wouldn't know that it's the same bassist, guitarist, and drummer. They took it to a different place, and but yet still write melodic things. And then when you have a singer with the capability of Miles, my God, I mean, I would just think that's so freeing as a songwriter to go, okay, well, if we're writing it, yeah, Miles can hit that. And to me, it was just it's all in the music. If the song is good, that's all that matters. And I heard that first album sitting in Mark's house, and I went, this is an amazing album. And again, it was with Mark singing at that point. And he didn't think he was a strong enough vocalist. I was like, dude, you're a good singer. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, then you hear it with Miles, and it's just, it's insane.
Yeah, and I feel like with Mark Tremonti, he was always kind of underrated as a guitarist because of, like you said, the Scott Stapp backlash. Like even his solo album, I thought was it had so many great riffs. Like this guy is a riff machine.
Absolutely. I think now, finally, he's starting to get his just due. I think England was the first to catch on and really understand just how much of, you hear that term guitar god, but I've sat I've gone to multiple Alter Bridge shows and sat with Mark beforehand, and he's always practicing. Like, there's not a point where I've not seen a guitar in his hands. And you can't see his hands. That's how fast he's moving and going, but precise too. It's one of those deals where you sit down with him and go, yeah, okay, well, I'm never going to pick up a guitar, because why would you? When you see that, it's kind of insane, and I think, I've been lucky enough to kind of sit and hang out and pick the brains of like him, of Zakk Wylde and guys like this. And it just blows my mind to see how damn good they are,
I interviewed Zakk Wylde for the show, actually, and I was a little taken aback at how big of a wrestling fan he's. Like, dude is legit into it. Like,
oh yeah.
When you guys hang out, is it like you kind of picking his brain about rock and him picking your brain about wrestling?
Man, he's constantly like going into Ultimate Warrior mode on me, and I'm trying to find out, like, oh, okay, so what was Mama, I'm Coming Home like? What was that recording session like? No, what was Ultimate Warrior like? So it's kind of cool though, because we can meet in the middle on that. We both appreciate kind of what we do, and he's much more of a madman than me, but I think we both appreciate our certain types of craziness.
First of all, I want to say you are an absolutely easy interview. You went through like 3 questions of mine on that last response. I just want to add,
verbal diarrhea.
No, it's great. I love it. But I wanted to talk a little more about Rob Zombie, because like you mentioned, he was like the first, your second theme, like after the original You Think You Know Me theme. And for me as a teenager, there was nothing like as a new metal kid, like a new metal 16-year-old, seeing you come out to Rob Zombie was just like, oh, like it was the coolest thing ever to me. And I'm assuming he already had that song written. What was it like hanging out with him? Because I know he's also a big wrestling fan. Like, what was that whole process like?
Very cool, because it goes back even further than that. I remember getting my first tattoo at this place in Toronto called Art of Torture. And it was the first time that I heard White Zombie. And it was Last Exorcisto, and it was just that kind of lo-fi. I couldn't even put my finger on what I was hearing, but I was like, this is amazing. Like, this has a groove, and it moves, and it makes you want to move, which sometimes, let's be honest, metal will make you move certain ways, but it doesn't always make you groove.
Right.
And I think Pantera has that, but White Zombie definitely had that. And I just remember saying, like, hey, can you flip that cassette again? Because this was in the days of cassettes. And I was hooked. And then when I saw them, because again, visually, I'm big on the visual, and I started seeing some of these videos, and I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So fast forward all these years later, and I just took a stab in the dark. I was like, hey, I was off of an injury. I forget which one. And I said, what about Rob Zombie? Because he has a new album coming out. And I said to Kevin Dunn, who's basically the executive producer of WWE, I said, is that possible? He goes, well, let me find out. Following week, I get an advanced CD with no label, no nothing. It's just 4 songs is what it says on it, Rob Zombie. And I'm like, okay. They said, pick your song. I went, oh my God. So I'm like, this is amazing. I got my Discman. I go up in the stands and I start listening to the 4 tracks. And I just never going to stop seemed to encompass what I felt like my character was. He's just going to keep getting up. He's going to keep coming. And that to me was kind of my mindset on that. Also, it just had that kind of groove that you wanted to bounce to it. And I always, I just liked that. It was the same with the Brood music. There was just something that you kind of bounced to.
Yeah, I still put that on. I still just like listen to the Brood. That beat is just gets your neck going. You can't help.
It does. It does. And if you watch the 3 of us, we didn't mean to do that. We were all just kind of, it would just hit us and we'd start grooving to it.
You're vibing.
So it was, sorry?
I said you guys were just vibing.
Yeah, basically. So when I listen to those 4 songs, Never Gonna Stop, it wasn't the heaviest, but it seemed to fit the tone of what I wanted to present the best.
Also, I vaguely remember there was maybe like a music video or something where it's like Rob Zombie in concert and you come out and you're just hanging out with the band on stage. And like, I remember as a kid thinking like, that looks a little awkward, but still I would want to hang out with Rob Zombie on stage while he's performing.
So it's funny that you say that because it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And they said, you're going to go to Rob. It was when Rob and Ozzy, it was the Merry Mayhem tour. And I just thought I was going to meet Rob. And I didn't really think much more of it, right? So I'm back there. I already know Zakk because he's been to shows. So I'm talking to Zakk, and now I'm talking to Sharon, and she's asking if I can play guitar. And I'm like, no. And then so I meet Rob and meet his wife, Sherry, and we're sitting there talking and everything and really hitting it off. And he goes, okay, so I was thinking, what if you came out in your gear? And I was like, come out? He's like, yeah, I want you to come out on stage. I was like, oh, my gear. And it immediately I was like, oh, that's going to be so awkward. But then I saw his stage and I'm like, I'm not going to be the weirdest thing up there. There's going to be far stranger things up there than a dude without a shirt on and a trench coat. So I went, if it had been almost any other band, I would have went, why don't we just do street clothes? But when you're up there, if I'd been in street clothes, I would have looked more awkward. So I just went all in and went, right, I'll go out there and sure, I'll just bang my head and run around the stage.
That's a great point. Yeah, you can't. You definitely didn't look like the weirdest thing on that stage for sure, with all the gizmos and everything.
It was such an amazing stage set. I was like, well, I would look more weird and awkward in my street clothes up there.
You mentioned earlier that your family members got you into rock. What music are you exposing your kids to? Because I know you have 2 kids.
Yeah, I'm not going down the full metal route with them yet. We're dipping our toes in. So they hear a lot of Pearl Jam, and they hear a lot of Foo Fighters, which they call the Flu Fighters, and they absolutely love Weezer. Weezer is their band, and I feel like that's a good introduction to some pretty crunchy guitars, but some really hooky, fun, but yet I can still listen to rock and roll, which is great, so we all sing along to it together. And so that's kind of where we're starting there. And little by little, I'll start introducing them to the other stuff, but they're always throwing up the horns and, Dad, this is what you do. And I'm like, well, no, that's what Edge does.
That's really sweet. I think that those are good building blocks for future metalheads, and then maybe in a few years.
It was like I started with Queen and Cheap Trick and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. Those were the building blocks to then discover KISS, to then go down the wormhole.
Well, switching gears a little to wrestling, I'm sorry. I do want to ask a few things, but do you remember your first wrestling memory? Do you remember how you got into pro wrestling?
So the first thing that I remember that was wrestling was Pacific Northwest Wrestling, and in Canada I got 3 channels at the time, but I got CKVR out of Barrie, Ontario, and they would show this thing called BC All Star Wrestling based at British Columbia in Vancouver. Well, they would occasionally show these clips from Pacific Northwest Wrestling down in Portland, and I remember seeing this clip of Roddy Piper cutting a promo to the camera in these green and yellow kind of tartan trunks and smashing a bottle over his head. And I just remember not being able to take my eyes off of it. His cadence, his energy. I didn't understand what it was. Like, I didn't even know what I was watching. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And then about maybe 3 years later, I saw a Hulk Hogan promo. And this was 84. We're probably looking at like February of '84. And I went, oh my God, wait, hold on. And they were talking about Maple Leaf Gardens. So I was like, Maple Leaf Gardens? I can go to Maple Leaf Gardens. Like, I can go see this? It didn't make sense in my mind. But once it did, once I realized, wait, this is real life superheroes. I can go, like, possibly shake hands with these guys. This is a game changer. Now my world of comic books has just become, this tangible thing. I can go see a guy that reminds me of the Incredible Hulk, and I can go see somebody that can do stuff that Spider-Man might be able to do, but they're real, and I can go see that. That was it. I was done at that point.
That's awesome. I love it. And do you keep up with wrestling now? Like, I know, like, when it becomes like a job, you've experienced it, you have decades of experience, but like, do you still kind of follow it as a fan? Do you watch non-WWE stuff to kind of keep up with what's going on? Like, what is your interest level in the genre right now?
It's weird because I was so eyeballs deep in it, as a fan, and then got in the industry, and it was my everything. And when I was forced to retire, I really took, a step back. I felt like I needed to, because I was told I couldn't do it. So if I kept watching and I kept being as deeply engrossed in it as I was, I didn't know how healthy that was going to be. So I really, really pulled back. And it wasn't until a little bit later on, and Christian Jay started saying, what if we did this show on the network, and what if we did a podcast? So little by little, I started dipping my toes back in, and there'd been enough time that it almost felt like this thing that was pulled away from me, I could now start to enjoy again. I'd gone through my self-therapy on it, I guess. And then you fast forward, and I start, the brain starts kind of percolating on this idea of like, wait, I'm doing these TV shows, and I'm going through walls, and I'm doing all of these fight scenes, and I feel okay. Then I'm wiping out my mountain bike going downhill and all of this stuff. And that's when I started realizing maybe I could do this again, or maybe I've been told I can't. Then I start seeing doctors. They tell me I can. I was like, okay. So now, being back in it and doing it again, I've really, played catch up. I did before I got the clearance, but now that I have the clearance and I'm back, I'm watching, but I'm watching from a different perspective, I think, because now I'm watching to basically to study. Go, okay, I'm going to wrestle that guy one day. What's he do? All right, I'm going to wrestle him. I'm going to wrestle him. So now I'm studying them and trying to pick apart and pull apart how I can fit into that and make that work within my style. And that's what I used to do when I was training and trying to make it to WWE. And that's what I did all throughout my time with WWE, because I wanted to know what everyone on that roster did, so that if Monday night I get there and I'm wrestling that person, I'm prepared, I'm ready. I got it. And that's what I'm doing now. And it's a whole new crop of people that I've never laid hands on. So it's really exciting in that regard. And it's got me, watching again. But again, not like I did as a fan, more like I did even, when I was doing the acting in those 9 years off. I started watching movies and shows and trying to peel apart why actors made certain choices that they made. And why did they do this? And why did they do that? Why would the director use this shot? That's how I'm looking at wrestling.
More like a research.
Yeah. Just studying and trying to peel apart and ask myself why this made me feel this way and have it garner this reaction. And that's really, it's a lot of fun, actually.
And you were mentioning even the cameras. Like, I noticed even with the match you had with Randy Orton most recently, how you guys had a few unique shots, which, caused a little controversy, but it was cool to me. Like, you guys were trying something new. Why not? Let's push the genre.
We tried a bunch of them, but it didn't really work to me. And it was my idea. So I was like, okay, I got this idea, and now's the time to try it, because there's no audiences. So we did the match. We did it. And then we went back to try a couple of these shots just to see if they'd work. When I saw them, I was like, we don't need them. We don't need them at all. But I guess Vince liked them. So 2 of them stayed in. And I almost want to do like a Zack Snyder director's cut without, it's all of a second in total. I think it's like half a second one and then half a second the other. We did the superplex all straight through. The cameraman dove in the ring as we were going up. And I saw him come in the ring. I was like, oh, this is going to look awesome. We hit, he bounced, and then he slid back out. So that was all live one take. The only thing were those 2 little angles. But you gotta try. You gotta throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, especially during a weird time like right now.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely, it was unique. Yeah, like you said, like it's a good time to try something new, and it kept me personally engaged, kind of trying to see like, oh, what other kind of visual tricks would they try? So I always appreciate that sort of thing.
And I think it works better if it's not a straight wrestling match. Like it works for the Boneyard match, and it works for like the Fiend stuff. It can even work for this Raw Underground stuff. But I think for ours just needed to be a straight wrestling match without any gimmicky camera angles. So like I said, I think it's a second in total, but that second really bugs me because it almost takes away from what we did.
Well, if I could be a contrarian, I think it's because like that the first time you see it is like in the when you guys do not the headline, when you guys first lock up. There was the undershot, and it was like right at the beginning, and as a viewer, I'm like, whoa, like I've never seen this shot before. Like they're really kind of going for it, So perhaps maybe if it like a shot like that was a little later in the match, it wouldn't immediately kind of like kind of not shocking,
But to me, my idea was if we're going to do it, we got to put it there so people know. Because if you do it halfway through, it's going to be like, wait a second, what was that? We were totally into it. And then that. So that's why there was one early and then one later. But I think it was better without either. Because like I said, Randy and I went out there for 50 minutes straight through. And I wrestled 50 minutes after almost 9.5 years without having a match like that. But then it's, well, you did multiple takes. Like, well, no, we didn't actually. There's 2 add-ins that were done after that got added in. But it is what it is. I'm just a perfectionist.
Well, your passion always comes through, and as a longtime fan, I have to say, like, there were periods where my fandom wasn't like the most passionate about WWE in general, but I felt like if like you were in the main event, it's like, well, I know that match will be good, you've kind of built this reputation and this brand of having great matches with no matter the opponent, and it really shines through, I think, and you can even tell now with how passionate you're talking about this Orton match.
Yeah. I mean, I care about my the works that I put out there, and like any band, I'm sure they want to try stuff. If you go back to like Load and Unload, it's not like I was trying stuff, and I get it. I get why. Do you like it as much as Master of Puppets? Well, no. Me personally, I don't. But I understand why they did it and why they tried, because you have to. If you just stay in that same box, not only is it going to get boring, but there's only so many times you can spin that same wheel.
Absolutely. And I also like one thing that I feel you could relate to is, like I will come up to a musician after a show being like, wow, that was amazing. You guys did so good. And they would be like, really? I messed up here, and here. I feel like that's something that wrestlers probably share with music. It's just any creative person. You will always just remember the mistakes and not the greater picture of the match in general.
At least initially, I think you focus on those things, but then when you take a step back and give it time and go, okay, there's always going to be something, and I think any creative person, they're going to initially dwell on that something just because you want it to be exactly how you envisioned it. And if it's not that, then it's going to bother you if you care. But I do think most care, which is why, they'll say that. I don't know. I missed this chord. I missed that. The same thing. You're right.
I did want to ask. I saw something online that your input is being requested for Raw, and that like you're kind of recommending guys to push or something like that. Is that true? Are you like watching and saying, give this guy a little nudge?
No, I'm watching basically to see who I could possibly help, whether that's in terms of promos, whether that's in terms of fleshing out character, and I do see a lot of guys and girls that, oh, okay, there's something here. I don't know if they've just fully figured out what it is yet, and maybe I could help them figure that out. Maybe I could help them with their promos and help them, kind of figure out exactly what they're trying to bring to the table in terms of their character. And that to me is where I feel like I can help the most, while I'm out. And having had, 28 years of experience in this thing that is wrestling, right? So, I floated that out there as like, if anybody wants to take me up on this, I'm here to try and help do that. And that to me is really exciting because I didn't just come back to collect a paycheck. I really do want to come back and try and help further the product and help talent that I feel, whether it's underutilized or whether it's just on the cusp of something, but trying to figure it out. And I might see something and go, ooh, okay, right, that right there. If we can take that, magnify that, focus on that, and that's where I feel like I can, be really helpful.
That's really cool, and I think you're someone perfect for that because you have done so many different personas. Like I remember just watching when you and Christian kind of developed the goofier stuff, which I was such a big fan of.
Yeah.
And then you transition to the more, like you said, like the more Guns N' Roses rated R guys. So, who are some of the, like, as you mentioned earlier, like you said, you also are doing research, seeing like, oh, I want to work with this guy. Like, who are people that are getting you excited to get back from your injury and get back in the ring and that you'd want to lock up with?
Well, it's interesting because I know a lot of people questioned why Randy and I, why this all started with Randy. And to me, it had to start with Randy because I had to see where I was at. And I had to see where I was at with someone that I absolutely trusted and felt comfortable with, but I also knew could push me. And Randy's that guy. There's so much history there. It just felt like the natural starting point. And I knew we'd get to all of these other matches that you never thought would happen. And so if I look at Raw, there's Seth Rollins. Obviously that's a gimme. It has to happen. There's AJ, that has to happen. In all the years that we've been in the industry, that never happened. Roman Reigns, I think that match and those promos, that's an instance where I say I feel like I could help someone find that thing that is in them, but they just haven't tapped into yet. That to me is a big one right there. The stuff that I could do with Bray Wyatt, just outside the box stuff would be so much fun. And then there's a lot of guys that I feel, there's the Cesaros of the world. I feel like Ali. I look at NXT and there's like Damian Priest, Balor's down there. And then there's Matt Riddle, and then there's I never really had proper singles matches with a guy like Sheamus. And then you can revisit Jeff Hardy, and there's just so much to be able to do and so many exciting ways to go. That's fun, man. I mean, I can almost look at the entire roster and every matchup feels fresh because I was gone for 9 years. It not only is a match with Jeff Hardy almost new again, but then you get guys that I've already mentioned that I've never even touched and been in there with. And I'm looking forward to all of that. It really is going to be fun.
Yeah, honestly, I was just getting some goosebumps thinking about some of those. Like even just a rework Jeff Hardy feel. Like you guys always had amazing matches. Like even his the feud you had over I believe it was the World Championship. That was my favorite feud of that year. And you mentioned Seth Rollins, and that just totally triggered a memory. Like you kind of made Seth Rollins. Like you were like the Mick Foley role, like what Mick Foley was for Randy Orton all those years ago. I feel like you kind of were that role for Seth Rollins when he was coming up and doing his Money in the Bank thing, where you guys did that angle where he was going to break your neck. Like that was such a amazing angle and such a huge way to put him over to get him to the next level. And that right there is a ready-made feud.
Well, that was always my, anytime they asked me to come back, I said, the only way I want to come back is if it's going to get someone over, get them heat, and mean something. I don't want to come back and just do the promo of the week and all of these things. So that was one of those instances. I mean, fast forward to me and Becky in the ring, and that promo was meant to put Becky over. And that's really what I wanted to do, because at that point I didn't think I could wrestle. But I thought, well, if nothing else, with some form of cachet from all of those years, maybe somebody else can get over. Like you said, like Mick Foley, coming back to help me, to help Randy, to further along, a generation of guys. And that's what I assumed my role was if I came back. And so now I can take it and even further that, because now I can get in there with them. And that's how I can really, really help more than any other way, is to be in there with the people and try and tap into some of the things. I mean, some of them don't need it. They're already there, which is just going to be a night off, and it'll be so much fun. But I see a group of talent that I feel like haven't scratched the surface on where they can get to. And that, to me, is really fun to help them try and get there.
I just remembered the match you had with Mick Foley at WrestleMania. And was that flaming table spot like the scariest thing let me do it this way. What was scarier, that spot or the spot at WrestleMania, I believe 17, where you speared a dangling Jeff Hardy off the like hanging on the belts?
Definitely the flaming table. The one with Jeff Hardy, I didn't even really think about it. It just, it was WrestleMania, and we're going to do this. And that was that. There was no real fear or thought or any kind of thought about the repercussions of physically, none of that. And even with the Mick thing, I didn't fully grasp it until I was running to hit the ropes. And I realized I don't have a shirt on. Mick has 3 shirts on. Huh. That's when it really dawned on me as I was hitting the ropes to come back to spear him. That was really the first time where it all started, kind of the gravity of this situation started, dawning on me. And, I clipped my foot on the ropes. It could have ended horribly for both of us, but especially for me, because I was going face first into that, and that was another thing I didn't really factor into the equation. Like, Mick's going through back first. That sucks. Don't get me wrong. I was going in face first. How do I do this? So if you watch back, I basically just tucked my head in as hard as I could into Mick's stomach and just hoped for the best. And even then, I still singed my eyebrows, still singed off a chunk of hair. I got burned. The hair on my arms and hands were gone. It's weird when you're crawling over to cover someone and all you can smell is yourself burning.
Is that like one of those moments? Like, what is my job? What is my, like, what am I?
And all I'm thinking is somebody's got to call my mom. Somebody's got to tell her I'm all right. That's what's going through my head as I'm walking to the back, and I just remember seeing fans like looking at me, not real, like, and reacting like I was, Jason Voorhees with an axe in my head or something. I was like, what's going on? And then I look back and I see like the blood went into my eye. So it